Zelete, thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you all. The global economic system is not broken. It is working exactly the way it was designed to work. For decades, the mainstream narrative has blamed Africans' lack of development on internal corruption, bad governance, or lack of entrepreneurship. But a viral interview breaking down the raw geopolitics of global trade exposes the real reason why Africa is not moving forward. The simple, brutal truth is that rich countries have absolutely no interest in allowing Africa to develop. Consider the geopolitical math. If Africa tomorrow decides to develop its heavy industry, the way South Korea did, a nation that was as poor as Mozambique just decades ago, the entire Western economic model collapses. If Africa starts refining its oil, manufacturing its own cars, processing its own agricultural products like cocoa, it will instantly stop buying Western and Asian imports. The moment Africa achieves self-sufficiency, the rich nations lose their captive markets and their cheap source of raw materials. The global elites are not interested in that situation. Geopolitics is a zero-sum game of interest, and the wealthiest nations are protecting theirs. To understand why Africa remains trapped, you have to look past the illusion of the free market and look at how the global financial architecture enforces a devastating asymmetry of information.
Personne n'intéresse que l'Afrique se développe trop. But no one is interested in Africa developing too much. Because if it develops tomorrow, let's imagine Africa develops its industry like South Korea did, a country that was as poor as Mozambique 6 years ago. If tomorrow it starts making cars, if tomorrow it starts refining its oil, if tomorrow it starts doing agriculture and transforming its agricultural products, it will no longer buy our imports. And so we are not interested in that situation. We are not interested. So the will of the rich countries. We're talking about geopolitics today. Everywhere we see, there is clearly no interest in these countries developing. These less developed countries. Please watch this video carefully. You will understand the main reasons why Western powers prevent African countries from developing properly. Before we continue, like and subscribe to this channel for more informative videos like this one. Do not forget to share this video on Facebook and WhatsApp to open the eyes of as many Africans as possible. Thank you for your support. Let's continue. Il y avait cette idée, en fait, dans la tête des gens. There was this idea, actually in people's minds, that you develop a country with entrepreneurs. It's an important part, but it's not the main part. An industry is needed, a heavy industry. These countries export oil, export cocoa, export raw materials, but these raw materials they export are often processed in other countries. And processing is what creates jobs. Quand vous avez une compagnie étrangère qui s'installe, je prends toujours l'exemple du Congo, Brazzaville, que je connais bien. When you have a foreign company setting up, I always take the example of Congo Brazzaville, which I know well. Congo Brazzaville, over 90%, only exports oil. This oil is produced by whom? Exploited by whom? By mostly private companies. 60% total, 30% ENI. The Italian, 90% of the company. Then you have a few companies here and there, private ones. Son pétrole. Elle a récupéré une partie de l'argent, mais elle est incapable de l'exploiter. The public Congolese oil company is unable to do drilling. It is unable to exploit all of its oil. It collects part of the money, but it is unable to exploit it. So all the knowledge on production, on reserves, all the quantities, production volumes are decided by the private company, which does not depend on the country. So that's the first thing. There is a real asymmetry of information between the state and the company. The prices of their goods, 90% of exports, therefore oil, the price is not determined by Congo. It is determined by the financial markets. So, when there are tense geopolitical situations like now, prices go up, it benefits them. Et l'État congolais rachète de l'essence à ces pays-là. Donc la réalité, c'est qu'il voudrait qu'il y ait une industrie qui puisse transformer. When the price is zero, as in the COVID period, nothing comes in. Nothing comes in. So we can see that there is a very strong dependence. And then this product is exported, processed in France or elsewhere. And the Congolese state buys gasoline back from these countries. So the reality is that there should be an industry that could transform its production on the spot. And it is this one that would create jobs, refineries, distribution, etc. But to have that, what is needed? Funding is needed to finance heavy industry. It's not with €1 of microcredit that you're going to finance heavy industry. And this funding, if the banks don't want to lend it, who will lend it? It's China, but China is a country. It will lend it under certain conditions. Conditions sometimes on access to raw materials or more advantageous sharing of production for them. And so it does not allow them to be completely independent. And it must be kept in mind that rich countries have developed in a world where they created conditions that were favorable to them. The WTO, the World Trade Organization, is an organization that has favored rich countries much more than poor countries. The financial system, with mostly European and American banks, the rich countries. And so rich countries raise huge funds to carry out their projects, while poor countries to carry out projects we know. That is to say, to do things we know, refineries, food, agricultural industries. We know how to do that. Well, they can't raise money. What I'm add, excuse me, I interrupt you. What I'm add is that we have often said in recent years that poor countries were not developing because of corruption. We had to find a reason. It's corruption, the informal economy. These people are corrupt. There is an informal economy. They do not respect the rules. They are corrupt. Some even went further by saying that they are a bit lazy. It has always been a bit like that. And we found the same kind of debate when there was the sovereign debt crisis in Europe, where we called the southern countries pig. They were called Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain. They were called the pig. They were said to be lazy, that they were in the informal, that they were not like the Germans and the French. This debate already existed with African countries. They don't work, they're lazy. They don't have good training, they are corrupt. Very well, that's what we said. If tomorrow I were given the reins of Congo, Brazzaville, and I was told what the formula is in the current conditions to get it out of underdevelopment and make the economy take off, it would be extremely complicated, and I would tell you that I don't have the solution. Because it's a country, in fact, that does not have control over development at all. Because it does not have access to financing, as I said. Because it does not control the main good it produces. Because it does not control the volume and the price. And so developing a country under these conditions is extremely difficult. So corruption is actually a collateral effect. The real problem is the World Trade Organization and the financial system as it was created. Would you say that there has been a stranglehold by the northern countries? I'll explain, for example. We're looking for what the exit routes are, and especially by whom. Because you may have the preconceived idea of yes, the northern countries are going to help the southern countries again. But in fact, it is because there is a stranglehold and also an enrichment of the northern countries thanks to and by the southern countries. For example, Zambia just had extra time to pay back, but the debt was not written off or reduced, etc. There are also negotiations on the next contributions of rich countries for the upcoming 3-year period, which will soon begin and should end in December 2024. There are also many solutions put forward by the IMF, which are considered as not enough actually. Which way do you think should be oriented towards? So it is exactly what you said. That is to say that in reality, Africa buys a lot of imports from Europe, and also mainly from France. And we buy a lot of things we need and don't produce, including oil and raw materials. So Western countries are not interested in Africa falling. Because if it goes very badly, if there is not a situation at least stable, what happens? We risk having fewer raw materials that we need, and in exchange, we risk selling them fewer things. So we have to maintain Africa in an intermediate situation, so that it is rich enough to buy our goods and stable enough for us to buy the goods we need. Those we really need, energy and raw materials. But no one is interested in Africa developing too much. Because if it develops tomorrow, let's imagine Africa develops its industry like South Korea did, a country that was as poor as Mozambique 6 years ago. If tomorrow it starts making cars, If tomorrow it starts refining its oil, if tomorrow it starts doing agriculture and transforming its agricultural products, it will no longer buy our imports. And so we are not interested in that situation. We are not interested. So the will of the rich countries. We're doing geopolitics today. Everywhere, we can clearly see that there is no interest in these countries developing. These LDCs. Now, if I were in the place of Africans, it is very difficult. That is to say, for me, the first thing I would do is I would be much more aggressive in negotiation. Because if you don't have financing, then you can hold grand speeches. It's always nice. But once you get to the concrete, what is Africa today concretely? As it does not have access to financing, as it does not control the goods it produces, in volumes as in prices, it is trying today, for there to be activity, to attract as much foreign direct investment as possible, by creating free zones where very little tax is paid, saying that this is the only way we have to restart the economy, which does not allow it either to develop its industry, because the industry that would come is much more powerful and much more established than the one that would develop and would be a nascent industry. So the first thing I would do in this situation, which is an extremely complicated situation, I would seek to be much more aggressive in the production shares. That is to say, when a foreign company comes, you have to impose things on it. The Gulf countries, Qatar, the Emirates at their time, when you came to settle with them for anything, you had to give a big part, more than 50%, to a local native, a local resident of the investment. It was mandatory. The WTO did everything to knock this out, but some countries held firm, except when they really needed it. They make exceptions at the Ministry of Economy, but when they estimate that the person has to give a part, he gives a part to the natives, which trains them. You see, for example, this type of measure could be applied by some African countries. If they applied it, of course, as a whole, it would be better.
Take the example of Congo-Brazzaville, a country where over 90% of exports come entirely from oil. This oil is not drilled, processed, or managed by Congolese state. Instead, 60% of it is controlled by private Western corporations like Total and Italy's Eni. Because the local state-owned oil company lacks the specialized machinery to drill its own oil, it is entirely dependent on the private foreign entities. This creates a dangerous imbalance. The private companies hold all the data on the reserves and the actual production volumes and the technical quantities. The state is left in the dark, collecting whatever fraction of the money the corporation hand over. Whereas the price of the oil is not determined by the Congo, it is dictated by international financial markets. When global tensions flare, prices spike, and the profit flow directly to foreign boardrooms. When the prices crash, or when global lockdowns stop trade, the trade economy faces total devastation. This brings us to the core of Africans' underdevelopment, the systematic denial of heavy industry. Africa is forced to export raw oil, raw cocoa, and raw minerals, only to buy back processed gasoline, chocolate, and electronics from the very countries that took their resources. The value addition happens entirely outside the continent. Real structural development requires massive funding for heavy industry, factories, refineries, and local distribution networks that create millions of sustainable jobs. But the international financial system keeps Africa trapped in a cycle of microcredit. And this makes the African economy not to grow. And when they are done, they turn back and point fingers at the leaders in Africa, blaming it on us, claiming we need better leadership. So every year or every election, the African thinks about getting a better leader who will now come and change the situation. So we keep voting, we keep electing, yet these leaders come and they are not able to change their economy. Why? It is systematically designed to remain this way, so it will continue to benefit other people. Look at what he said. If they should allow Africa to do it today, like they watch Korea do, they will be in trouble. where will they feed themselves from? So because of what they need to get, they have to make sure Africa never move forward. So before you think about having elections to elect leaders who will come and change your economy, remember this speech and know that there is nothing that your leaders can do if we do not have a revolution that will give us a better Africa like we are seeing in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. So the systems that we have, the democracy that we have, all these things are part of the system that is trapping the African. That is trapping the African. And these are all the things that are making the African not to move forward. So the youth of Africa, before you think about blaming your leaders of corruption, you should think about this as well. Know where the genesis is coming from. So any leader who is still under that system that was given to us by the oppressor, we will continue to be where they want us. And that is why they are after the leaders in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. Because when their model succeeds and any other person decides to follow, they lose grip. And they know that if Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso are not stopped, the rest of the continent will be forced to follow. So they have to do everything in their power to cut everything short. So Africa is not developing because of the bad leaders, because of corruption, because we don't have ABC, but because it is a network that was built and Africa is trapped in that network. And until we are able to move out of everything that was handed over to us by the same people, we will find it so difficult to get to our destination. We are the only ones that can set ourselves free. United we stand, divided we fall, and united we keep standing forever and ever. The greatest enemy of the African is mental slavery. So let's decolonize ourselves from mental slavery. Let's keep sharing to educate our brothers and sisters. Together we make Africa great for ourselves and the next generations that are going to come. So that's the latest around the world and in Europe.